By the time he realized it was not just a favor, but a deal, it was already in writing. He sat in the cramped conference room at the regional office, fluorescent light buzzing, watching the regional director slide the folder across the table like it weighed nothing. To him, it felt like a cinder block. "It's just a reclassification issue," the director said, voice calm, tie perfectly straight. "You sign off, the numbers look cleaner, corporate is happy, and your branch avoids a whole lot of uncomfortable questions." The documents were about tenants in the company's low-income housing portfolio, a series of compliance adjustments that turned real people into neat lines of text. On paper, it looked technical, harmless. He knew what it meant. Families coded as ineligible, quiet approvals for higher rent increases, reports that would make it nearly impossible for certain tenants to fight back. "Why me?" he asked, throat dry. "Because you re the one everyone calls the conscience of the building," the director said with a small smile. "When your name is on something, people trust it. I am not asking you to love it. I am asking you to protect your job, your staff, your family." The word family hit harder than the rest. Mortgage, his wife has health insurance, his kid has tuition deposit already paid to a state college. He saw all of it sitting on the table with that folder. "And if I do not sign?" he pushed. The director's smile faded. "Then corporate looks at your branch as a problem instead of an asset. Audits, restructuring, maybe closure. Someone else will sign this eventually, but they would not care what happens to your people." The quiet threat wrapped itself around everything he cared about. He picked up the pen, hand shaking just enough that he hoped the director did not notice, and signed. The ink soaked into the paper, into the numbers, into someone else's life. Walking out of the building, he told himself it was a one-time compromise, a necessary, ugly choice to keep things from getting worse. But when he checked his email that night, there was already a new message from the director. "Glad we on the same page. I'll be sending quarterly packets like this before reports go to corporate. Keeps us all safe." That was the moment he understood it was not a favor. It was a quiet deal, and he was already inside it. The first month, he tried not to read the names in the spreadsheets. He told himself it was less cruel that way. He focused on columns and codes, on non-compliant documentation, and adjusted eligibility, pretending they were not families who would soon get letters with language they could not fight. Every quarter, another packet arrived, always with the same short note. "Need your sign-off by end of week." The director's tone stayed warm, friendly, like they were partners in a small, necessary secret. When a tenant came into the branch office in person, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, holding a crumpled notice about a rent increase, he felt the deal tightening around his throat. "There has to be a mistake," she said, fingers trembling. "I've lived here 8 years. I've never been late. I see not afford this." The notice had his branch's header at the top. The increase matched the adjustments in the last packet he signed. He pulled up her file, searching for something he could fix, some loophole he could exploit, but the system showed everything as properly authorized. "I am sorry," he managed quietly. The changes came from corporate policy. There's an appeal process, but he heard himself giving her the script they'd been trained to use. Watch her shoulders slump as she realized how little that meant. That night, he could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the look on her face, the way she clutched the notice like a diagnosis. When he suggested to the director that maybe they could slow down the rent hikes for some of the longest-term tenants, just a little, just enough to give people time, the director's response was smooth and immediate. "You rethinking too small. We repositioning the portfolio for a sale. Numbers matter. If we look soft, we get cut out of decisions. And trust me, you do not want people above me asking why the compliance officer in your branch is not a team player." The next packet included not only more rent adjustments, but also a draft email he was supposed to send to staff, reminding them to support the transition and avoid promising tenants anything that contradicts updated guidelines. He did not edit a word. He just forwarded it with his name at the bottom, watching his own authority become part of the pressure. At the end of the second quarter, an internal memo announced that their region had successfully optimized revenue across underperforming properties. There were congratulations, shout-outs, a line about special appreciation for his attention to detail. His phone buzzed with texts from colleagues. "You re-killing it. Drinks on you." He stared at the screen, stomach turning. The more he complied, the more he was rewarded. The more he was rewarded, the more the blame would land on him if anything broke. When the email came from corporate announcing a routine compliance review for their region, the director called before he could even open it. "Good news," the director said. "They not coming here. They restarting downtown, but they want our reports. The ones UV already signed. You see why it was important we were aligned?" He hung up feeling like someone had moved him from the edge of a cliff to the center of a narrow bridge on purpose. If the review went badly, his signature was the one sitting under every adjustment. The deal was not just eroding his dignity now. It was slowly lining him up as the one who would fall first if someone cut the rope. The crack in the arrangement did not come from corporate. It came from a misdirected email. Late one afternoon, while clearing a backlog of messages, he opened an attachment meant for the regional director that had been copied to him by mistake. It was a spreadsheet like the ones he'd been signing, but this one had comments in the margins. Next to entire sections of adjusted tenants, someone had written notes: flagged for portfolio sale, prepare eviction, friendly paper trail, push through before Q4 review. There were also references to internal calls he'd never been invited to, lines that read, "He signed if we frame it as branch protection," and "keep pressure subtle," remind him about staff cuts if needed. The he in those notes was him. His name was not there, but the role was. He scrolled further and found an old email chain attached at the bottom, months of back and forth between the director and a corporate VP. In one message, the VP asked, "You sure your compliance lead is on board with this? Last thing we need is a conscience in that seat." The director had replied, "He cooperate. He cares too much about his people to blow anything up. Worst case, he has plausible deniability." He read that line 3 times. Plausible deniability. He was not a partner. He was a shield. If the review uncovered anything, his job was to catch the blow. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from the director. "Got time for a quick call?" When he picked up, the director sounded almost cheerful. "You saw the compliance review schedule? They re-stepping up random audits next quarter. Nothing to panic about, but we need to stay disciplined." He thought of the notes in the spreadsheet, the way his cooperation had been predicted, managed. How disciplined? He asked. "Disciplined enough to remember who pays your salary," the director said, the cheer flattening just a little. "Look, UV benefited from this. Raises, bonuses, job security. Do not start growing conscience now. That never ends well for people in our position." The warning sank in deeper than any compliment ever had. That night, he opened the company's internal ethics policy, something everyone joked about clicking past during annual training. It mentioned an anonymous hotline, protections for whistleblowers, assurances that no one would be punished for raising good faith concerns. On the screen, it looked clean and simple. In his reality, it looked like a door with no handle. If he used it and nothing happened, the director would know exactly who had talked. If he stayed quiet, more tenants would get letters. More lives would rearrange around decisions they had not made. At home, his wife asked why he was so quiet if something was wrong at work. He thought about telling her everything, about how their health insurance and their kid's tuition rested on a crooked foundation. Instead, he said just a lot of changes. Fine. Line did not feel like a one-time thing anymore. It felt like another line in a contract he'd already signed. The decision did not come as a burst of courage. It came as a slow, exhausted realization that the life he thought he was protecting did not really exist anymore. One morning, a tenant showed up at the branch with a folder full of documents and a legal aid attorney by her side. She was calm, but her hand shook when she passed over the papers. "We reappealing this notice," the attorney said. "We have records of payments, old lease agreements, and a copy of an internal report with your name on it that does not match what she's getting in the mail." He took the folder and felt his own name staring back at him from the report. The numbers had been edited after he de-signed, manipulated to justify the rent jump. Someone had used his approval as cover. Who gave you this? He asked quietly. Does it matter? The attorney replied. We just know it came from inside. Inside. Someone else had reached their limit and pushed this out. He looked at the tenant, at the fear and stubborn hope in her eyes. For months, he had been telling himself he was too trapped to do anything. Now the proof of what they were doing was in his hands, and it had already started to leak beyond their walls. If he stayed silent, he was not just protecting his job. He was agreeing to help bury the truth. That afternoon, instead of forwarding the next packet to his inbox at home, he printed several of the most damning pages and locked them in his desk. Then he booked a short check-in meeting with the director. The director seemed relaxed when he arrived, leaning back in his chair, city view behind him. You look tired, the director said. Do not worry. When this transition is over, ULL thank me. He placed the printed pages on the desk, flipping them toward the director. Did you think I would not notice the edits? He asked. My signature is on these. The system logs show they were changed after I signed. The director did not even glance at the papers. You overthinking. Adjustments happen. Data gets cleaned up. Corporate does not care about the details. They care about results. So should you. Corporate is starting an audit, he said, and a tenant attorney already has a copy of one of these reports. If they connect this back, who looks responsible? The director's eyes hardened. Careful, he said softly. You walking very close to insubordination. You want to tank your career over a handful of people who do not even know your name? He realized, then, that fear was not the only thing keeping him in place. Shame was too. The shame of having gone along for so long. The director was counting on that, on the idea that someone who already compromised would not dare step forward. The only way to break the deal was to risk exposing his own part in it. I've read the ethics policy, he said, and I've documented everything within my role. If this goes down, I am not going alone. For the first time, the director looked uncertain. What are you planning to do? He asked. Call the hotline and pray someone cares? You really think corporate is going to protect you over me? He did not answer. He did not need to. By the end of the week, he had sent an anonymous report through the internal system, attached files from his personal email, and reached out to the legal aid attorney from a prepaid phone, offering copies of documents from someone inside who CA not stay silent anymore. When corporate finally announced an independent review of regional practices, the director summoned him again, but this time the tone was different, tight, controlled, edged with something like panic. You started something you CA not control, the director said. You in those documents, too. They eat you alive. Maybe, he replied, but at least they see the whole picture. In the weeks that followed, investigators arrived with neutral faces and careful questions. The director's confidence cracked under the weight of emails and logs and signatures that no longer aligned with his story. It became clear how the adjustments had been orchestrated, how pressure had flowed downward while benefits climbed up. When it was over, the director was separated from the company with a vague statement about policy violations. There was no big headline, no satisfying public confession, just a quiet removal. His own fate was less clean. He kept his license, but lost his role. Corporate offered a lateral position in another department, pending performance review. A safe way of saying they did not quite trust him either. He turned it down. He took a smaller job at a community nonprofit that helped tenants understand the paperwork he used to sign without reading. The pay was worse, the office older, the benefits thinner. But when he walked into work, his stomach did not clench. He still woke up some nights replaying the meetings, the signatures, the faces of those who had paid the price for his delay in speaking up. The deal he made had already destroyed the version of his life he thought he was protecting. What he had now was smaller, quieter, stripped of illusions. It was not a happy ending, not exactly. But when someone sat across from him with a letter that made their hands shake, he could finally look them in the eye and say, without lying, you not alone in this. And I am not on the other side anymore.